want to call the question. What are we doing? What will be our leadership stance in this moment? Will we expend all of our energy fending off and reacting to budget cuts? To, I just saw my sister friend. She pulled me off course. Yeah, when we expend our energy fending off and reacting to budget cuts and regulatory changes from a federal administration that has already told us they are determined to dismantle government as we know it. Or will we accept the invitation to step into a bigger, bolder vision, a vision of a nation that finally serves all? Now, I'm going to pause here just for a moment because I want to be crystal clear. We need folks to play all the roles. We must have defenders. We need litigants with legal standing to fight back in the courts. I want to shout out Alana Odom and the board and staff of the ACLU of Louisiana for the potential defending the protection promised us in the Voting Rights Act and the 14th Amendment by establishing and now defending a second majority Black congressional district. We need folks willing to organize thousands of public comments in response to an affirmatively furthering fair housing that condones exclusion rather than expansion of housing opportunity. We need folks to defend the fundamentals of our democracy and the essential services that keep folks afloat. So we have to have defenders. We also need organizers. Shout out to Ashley Shelton and the Power Coalition. Doris Henderson and the entire team at Berkeley. Angelica Moore at Housing Nova and my sister Asali Demasi. Yes. They have organizing efforts. They're organizing efforts helps deliver a housing trust fund in New Orleans with 75% of the vote in the same election that delivered this president. And the defeat of these four amendments that will not get resources and the lives of our children. Yes. I just have to thank you for your leadership. So we need defenders, we need organizers, and we need dreamers and builders too. So at Plan, our leadership stance is a founder stance. We recognize that the founding of this nation is not a one-time event. I've already shared key moments in our nation's history that prove my case: Reconstruction, the Civil Rights Movement, and I, that the women in this room, know something about founding. Because I once read a story about 22 times. But when talking about the founding of this nation, it's important to acknowledge, especially in moments like these, that for some of us, our rage or our trauma keeps us from taking on a founder's mindset. For others of us, it's our humility that limits us. I had to get comfortable with the idea that the framers of this nation were not superhuman. They were not celestial beings endowed with supernatural divine skills. Instead, they were courageous individuals willing to offer a new vision for a democratic nation built on the power of its people. And if I can see them as human, then I can acknowledge their own self-interest and the imperfections inside of what they do. And I can be clear that when they penned those words, "We the people," I wasn't included in that. The truth of their humanity allows me to accept the invitation to continue to perfect this nation. If nothing else, if all of that seems too big and shiny and impossible, then these past few weeks have proven that anybody can advance a new vision for this nation, so long as you have the courage to do so. But there ought to be one condition to being a founder. If and when you accept the invitation to be a co-founder of this nation, then you accept the responsibility of governing for all its people. But how can we govern for all if we can't see the humanity of every person? If we can't work in service of everyone's life? Obviously, they got clear that if we want to build something different, we have to become something different. We have to manifest souls that love all, even people who don't agree with us. I want you to think about what I'm saying. I run a national policy organization, a think tank, and I'm saying that data, research, policy, and advocacy cannot fix our hearts. So there's some questions we have to ask ourselves. I wish the first founders would have asked, well, when did they all do I really need them? Am I just using all as a front for my people? Can I work in service of everyone's thriving? And then for us, for me, as a person not included in the original definition of am I willing to live into its ideal, not sacrificing the beauty and brilliance of my identity, but embracing the difference? That opening meditation calls us back to dreaming and creating. She prays for defiant imaginations for what could be, but isn't it. So do I. So I too grew up in Black Baptist church. And you know, when church is good, you might run home and call your girl like, church is so good. The preacher was really saying. And she like, well, what was the next thing? And we like, then about, I don't know, something about governing for all. The words mean nothing if you don't know how to operate. So what can our defined imaginations manifest? Or put even more simply, what can we do in this moment? First, we got to choose a role and lean into it with everything we got. So folks, you know, the more destruction we see, the more anxious we get about what somebody else is doing. Well, why are they doing that? Well, I would have did it this way. We need all the roles. We need all. So pick one and lean in. I've already shared examples of amazing leaders here in New Orleans who are defending and organizing to secure the rights already promised. And then I was at the Delta Founder Scale last month, so I know that you're already supporting it. And you'll hear other folks, other opportunities, partnerships on the panel and during the breakout session. But I'm also inviting you to join Policy Link in the work of dreaming and building. So with the destruction of government as we know it, it's happening. We can finally admit that what we had was insufficient. We actually were not on the path to eliminating poverty and ensuring that everyone in this nation can thrive. So if HUD is dismantled, if CDBG funding goes away, what would we replace it with? What landmark legislation, what regulations would you craft to ensure that everyone in this nation has safe and affordable housing and a choice to live where they want? And what about EPA? How would you ensure clean and safe drinking water for all? Remember, there are 2.2 million folks still in this country that don't have access to clean water. And as the Department of Labor is done, how would you remake our governing structures to ensure family sustaining wages so folks really can pay rent, buy a bill, buy groceries, all at the same time? Let's dream again. Don't settle for what we got, especially when we know we don't end up with less. So as I close, I also read about a Delta named Frankie Freeman. In a moment not unlike this one, through her role on the United States Commission on Civil Rights during President Lyndon B. Johnson's administration, she conducted hearings all over the country, activating Deltas in every local community to share the experiences of Black people and inform new federal policy and new federal law, including the Economic Opportunity Act and what led to Head Start, Well, Policy Link is taking up the work of our generation to redesign the nature and logic of our governing institutions to work for everyone. So like Frank, we plan to bring together folks all across the nation to identify new values. So if it's not scarcity and competition and rugged individualism, if it's collective flourishing, we have to find that. We have to identify new values, new governing standards. What will we demand of the people who represent us? And new policies that deliver for we the people, all the people. So I'm asking you to help us organize town halls and listening sessions, help us gather the stories and dreams of everyday people, and set results for the new agents, federal, state, and local, to deliver on our dreams. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what we can do if we activate folks across the country, the state, the city, demanding that our governing institutions deliver for everyone? Help us do the work of our generation to redesign the nation to work for.
Thank you so much, Ashley. You set the tone for today. We appreciate it. We're going to ask our panelists to come on up for a little bit. We're going to make up a little bit of time. That's what Deltas do. We pivot, we transition. My name is Judge Rachel Johnson. I'm a member of New Orleans alumni of the Delta Sigma Theta, and we are here to have our public meeting panel at this moment. And I said my name is Judge Rachel Johnson because usually I just say I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta, but I wanted to reiterate what our president said. We have many members who are elected officials, but on this side of the aisle, we're just doing the work. We want to make sure you all are engaged and empowered, and so that's why we are here participating in this amazing symposium today. And I'm going to bring up our moderator for the day, who's also a member of the New Orleans Alumni Chapter, Gina Swanson. She needs no introduction. She is the person I watch every day. I text her. I'm like, thank you, Gina, for that information. She's a New Orleans girl. She's a veteran media expert, and she is going to do an amazing job today. So thank you, Gina. Thank you.
All right, y'all, good morning. It's my pleasure to be here today. I get asked to do a lot of events all the time, but when it's a political forum or some kind of way to participate in the civic process, I'll always say yes. If I can do it, I'll always say yes. Thank you for joining us here. We know this is the second annual public symposium. Last time, I don't know if you were here last time, we got some questions from the audience about Project 2025. For me, as a journalist, that was the first time I was really paying attention, but my good sister in the audience would not let it go. She would not let it go. She was like, okay, tell us about Project 2025. But don't we see it every day? Do we not see it play out every day? And so I was thinking about, I always try to write something clever to say to set the tone for our discussion, but my good sis Ashley already did that because it's time to call the question. She said it's time to call the question. Right? So we have a panelist with a very range of experience up here because it takes all roles, as my sis said earlier. We have Dr. Takesha Davis. We have Dr. David Wright, family Ecclesiastes. I say a member judge of himself. Michelle Hill, District Attorney Jason Williams. Did I get everybody? I got everybody? Okay. So with the framework of it's time to call the question, it takes all roles. We are going to just jump right in and give a little time for our panelists to have some opening remarks. We have a sense of who you are and what you do, but in terms of this political reality, talk about your work and how it's even more critical or important. We're going to start with our district attorney. We'll start.
I am Jason Williams. I'm the district attorney of Orleans Parish. I used to serve on the city council with Councilman Russo. I am a father of three. My youngest is a 7-year-old black boy. My middle child is a freshman in college. And my daughter is 24 years old and figuring out her way in life here in New Orleans. And being a father is my most important job. It drives me to do my second most.
Good morning. My name is Joe DeRusso. Not that I'm counting, but I have 275 days left in office. Yes, Jason just did the minutes. I am the former chair of the Public Works Committee and current chair of the City Council Budget Committee, where I've served with PA Williams and worked regularly with Senator Plessis. And I think the questions, the things that are being asked here today are the ones that are happening everywhere. They're important in making sure you have a cross-section of people to answer those questions. And I like what Ashley had to say about for all, how important that is.
Good morning. My name is Kashana Hill. I'm so excited and honored to be with you all today. I am a longtime civil rights and mostly fair housing attorney. Prior to my role leading the redress movement, I spent almost a decade leading the Louisiana Fair Housing Action Center, which many of you may know as the Greater New Orleans Fair Housing Action Center, which had previously been the name. My work has focused on challenging and eradicating discriminatory housing policies and practices, and I've dedicated my professional career to this work because I'm very clear that the ongoing inequities that we see across the country have their roots in our past history of racist and discriminatory housing policy that has never been discussed and has certainly never been addressed or remediated in any way. The work that I do now is leading the redress movement, which is a relatively young national nonprofit organization founded based on the response to the book, The Color of Law, which some of you may be familiar with. If you're not, I would suggest checking it out, especially now. It details how the federal government, in conjunction with the real estate industry, really created and continued to perpetuate the residential segregation that we see across the country today. The redress movement works to organize local communities to identify and secure remedies for the legacies of residential segregation. We do that work at the local level in several cities across the United States. I'm excited for today's conversation. Good morning. My name is Dr. Takesha Charles Davis, and I have the pleasure of serving as the President and Chief Executive Officer of New Orleans East Hospital. New Orleans East Hospital is unique in this community because it is the only one in the state of Louisiana that is led by a Black woman. In this country, among 4 Black women who lead hospitals. Prior to that, I worked for 10 years as the Assistant State Health Officer for the Louisiana Department of Health, which may not exist in the way that it did back then after our new leadership, and we'll talk about that later. But the work that I have committed myself to is ensuring that my family here in the world, where I'm born and raised, will continue to have health opportunity. And that means that we work to close the 25-year gap in life expectancy that exists between Black and white New Orleans. So the things that we will talk about to my good friend and just wonderful dreamer, Ashley, is that we are defenders of our health, because if we don't, then we won't be here. But we have to dream and vision, right, what it looks like for us to take control of our own health and wellness, and to be able to share that with you today. Good morning, y'all. How y'all doing? How your mama doing? Yeah, all right. How your babies doing? We need them in this room. I'm a spouse of Ecclesiastes. just a girl from the Federal Ward with 5 kids. Celebrate my 30th year. The Stonewall asking my 30th year as a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. As a five in March, you know, across the sand. You're going to have a birthday member. But I can hear because one thing I know, I've been blessed to go to all the places. Now I always come right back to it because I know there is one place in the world where we will grasp the society. Here in New Orleans, with a government that serves home, with a private sector that works on behalf of all, with a nonprofit sector who should be put out of business because the government is working for all. We can demonstrate an equity that can be modeled across the world. And as has been said today, now is the time. Let's get to it.
Morning. My name is Royce Duplessis. I have the great privilege of serving as state senator for District 5. I began in the Louisiana legislature in 2018. This morning, I'm just grateful to the women of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated. And I am just really honored to have been invited to be on this panel with so many people who I respect and have admiration for and have worked with in some capacity. You know, I'm thinking about my grandmother this morning, who was a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. She was also a graduate of Ghana 35 High School. And tell it too. We keep going. But the reason she's on my mind this morning is I'm thinking about where we are today in 2025 and where she was in 1945, 1950, 1955. A lot of the same systems and structure, the same system and structure that she grew up in and rose and tried to thrive in. That same system is still in play. We might be calling it something different. You know, it might be a different day of the year, a different day of the week, but a lot of that same system that Ashley talked about winners and losers, we're still in fighting every day. So outside of being in the legislature, I'm also a practicing attorney. And I went to Howard University School of Law, where Charles Hamilton Houston famously said that a lawyer is either a social engineer or a parasite on society. When I went to law school, I did not go with the ambition or the desire to be in public service. I mean, I'm still, even to this day, I'm like, this wasn't really something that I set out to do. But when I think about just the realities of where we are and the eternal question that all of us are faced with about what we can do, what should we do to respond, answering the call of the question. This is what I'm going through the policy role. I believe we all have to do something, whether it's legislation, whether it's litigation, organization, and a little bit of agitation. Everybody has a role to play. And I'm just grateful to you all for bringing us here this morning to have a more.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to tell a story. I can't tell a whole story without saying I'm also married to a member of the divine.
All right, now listen. Before we jump right in, just a few little ground rules. This is a public symposium. This is not a town hall, so you have to try and get in the aisles and shout questions. We have sorors in the room with cards. If you have a question, look around. Sorors, raise your cards. If you have a question, please ask for a card, fill it up. We will look through those cards, and time permitting, we may take some questions from the audience. I just wanted to get that clear before we move forward. I listened to Ashley's speech, and it was something, as she said, a statistic that like stopped her dead in her tracks. The 52% of working age Black men being unemployed. It's not me dead in my tracks too, because I remember that story. And I lived that life. I tried to help these brothers. Live that life. That was my reality. Even if you're trying to meet people where they are. My first question is, for us, when we do outreach, what are the modern day tools that we can use to appeal and incentivize the apathetic and defiant non-voter? There's a meme out there. I don't know if you saw it. The world's falling apart, but y'all learning boots on the ground. Y'all saw that? Y'all learning a lot of days. I'm still trying to get it, but all that to say, I mean, do we need boots to the polls or something? What can we do?
So yes, we do need boots to the polls. We also need inlines to the polls. We need polos to the polls. This is the thing. When we talk about, when Ashley talked about what's going under the surface generation after generation after generation. And I'm going to couple it with a quote Rush just said about either being a social engineer or parasite on society. That's not just lawyers, that's most professionals, right? Because what we learn in professions is how to manipulate the thing, or how to inspire. And too many of us choose manipulation over inspiration. And we've been doing it for generations, and we've been getting into office, and we have been leading organizations, and we have been running churches and schools, and still coming up with the same results more than people. They are the ones who are the defiant and what was the other word? Apathetic voters. They're the ones who have not seen any return of investment from their grandmother. So I'm about to do what my grandmother did and what my mother did, and I'm seeing what their life results are, and what their income, how they're even respected and treated in the street, right? So why would I participate in that? And what we have to do is show them why, like show them how. Well, we're seeing now how much worse they could get, right? So even with the limited outcome, as Ashley mentioned, they were able to go, and I think we were able to go because it was a great big collective effort, and many of the people in this room that, helped make that happen. And I think why so many people put their hand around it is because it was across economic and education. It didn't matter what kind of Black man you were, right? It didn't matter what neighborhood you grew up in or what your status was. That 52% number was if you had a PhD or no G. So we start to recognize that we are out and as such and give them an inspiration and ability to live in something where they manage. And like that. You want to act like the one that is close and the concert and it joins and joins all both where they are, but also show them both results of voting and not voting. We have a project called Young Peer Citizens where our young people engage up to this 16 to 24 to social messaging, like how the ideas, like start talking to them in their language, right? And our language too, that other language we learn and we become professionals is not what they make, right? So you have to translate these messages into things that are clear, understand, and that resonates. And like this is critical time. This is not literally seeing for our eyes. We have to ease up this topic. We're going to let it burn and then build into action. Or they're going to respond to them. So keep things on the so that so many environments are not going to be there.
That's a good thing. Something happened though on March 29th. When I went to vote on March 29th, my poll worker told me on spring elections, we usually have 100 people. I was in 351. And she said it. She said that a lot of young people came out to vote. And so something happened. Next question is for Senator President. Well, we are trying to educate voters about these issues. There's so much disinformation. I mean, $6,000 for one kid. I go, like, how much time? How the work is in my how that all the good information, the disinformation out there, really
get to the essence of what voters need to know.
Yeah, so misinformation and disinformation are two different things, but they're the same thing. You know, misinformation is, in my opinion, oftentimes innocent, and it gets lost. Things get lost in translation when people are trying to talk about an issue that they just don't have the right information, and it's being spread or people oversimplified because it has a lot of nuance out there, which is often the case when you're talking about policies and trying to educate our people. But then there's misinformation, which is where we know we've been seeing it, and it's been out there for a long time, but now it's like unapologetic. There's these various agendas that are out there to literally confuse and mislead people. All to bring us back to a place where we've been, which is disenfranchised, to keep people feeling like they don't understand. And when you don't understand, you're not going to subject yourself to being taken advantage of. So we get caught in this vicious cycle of people in my position blaming folks for not voting, and then you have people who are trying to stay them into voting, which we know doesn't work. Then you have the people who are disconnected, disaffected, and feeling disenfranchised, rightfully so. Policies aren't serving them, and they say, look, I'm going to go try to understand this 100-word long amendment that y'all put on the ballot, but I really don't know who to trust. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stay home. So that's the system that we're in. But I'm just so grateful that the stars really did align on us in so many ways. I believe that. Yeah. So this is an opportunity for us as a community and as a state to recognize our power. 12% showed up. It was put on the ballot for that reason. They said we're going to ram through as much as we can because we know they're not going to show up. And we woke up. Now we have more waking up to do, but rather than focusing on that, let's focus on the fact that we increased turnout more than 10% of what they expected us to do. And Orleans showed up. Okay, Orleans showed up. I'm saying let's take that opportunity and build on that momentum. And people like myself have a responsibility to help decipher the information, to help get it out to answer the hard questions, and then engage in these discussions. So it's never going to be perfect. There will always be questions. And sometimes we'll vote on an issue that, was supposed to have promised one thing. I'm going to tell y'all, a big one that we have to pay attention to this particular session is insurance reform. There's going to be so much information out there that's going to be misleading people on what's going to lead to homeowners and auto insurance rates that we really have to pay attention and get into the details. It's really complex. And it can be nuanced, but that's going to be a key issue that I'm going to be focused on, trying to simplify it and make it so that people understand not only what the effects are generally, what it has on the individual, because this is going to affect all of our lives. So it is an ongoing issue, and we need great people like you too. Y'all help us get the message out all the time. So let me come on. Please do.
Please, we would love it. We would love it. Our next question is for our district attorney.
You're been a parent. Talk about all of these things come into play when you do your everyday work.
Yeah, Jenny, you're absolutely right. I have seen the American criminal legal system every possible vantage point. I was a defense attorney for several decades, fighting for people's rights. Appointed a judge in 2003. Became a prosecutor while under indictment. Because I covered it very well. I appreciate your very balanced report. Doesn't happen on every channel. But on the day of qualifying, Bill Barr, the head of President Trump's first term, head of his DOJ, came down for the first time in Senate to give a speech to a bunch of conservatives saying we must find every way to push back against progressive prosecutors. Right? Now, he didn't have a governor at the time who could lean in the way DeSantis could lean in and remove State's Attorney Monique Morrell. Just took her out of office because she was making it a fair system. So having seen the system from all these varying angles, it is very clear that what happens in court not just impacts lives, but impacts families, impacts communities, impacts where you can find housing, what you can qualify for, what jobs you can get. And so you've got people who have been disaffected for years, never had their neighborhoods invested in, but find themselves facing the criminal legal system because the criminal court catches all the detritus, all the failures of society. It's mental health failure, it's addiction failure, it's a parenting failure. That winds up warehoused in the criminal court system. And my mother spent her first few years in the most rosy smelling town in the state, Oklahoma. And she had two uncles, Moses, Ray Waters. And to me, they were just two big farmers who had more overalls, who worked on cars, who were real sweet to me. But I found out later on in life that they were members of an organization which you don't even know about called the Deacons of Defense that fought for and to protect civil rights workers who had come to a hotbed plain territory to help people get their rights. But these regular men just voted right back into their communities and their homes. It showed me that regular folks can do extraordinary things. And that is what we've always relied on.
I learned about the Deacons of Defense about 10 years ago when the daughter of one of the deacons in Bogalusa, her car was bombed on Martin Luther King Day 10 years ago. So the things that we think are, in the past are certainly not in the past. Our next question is going to go to Ms. Hill. We heard Ashley talk about the level of organization it takes to really systematically exclude someone. We heard Jason just say the conservatives came down and met to say that we are going to do everything possible to get rid of progressive prosecutors. And now we are seeing DEI policies being eliminated, the laws being rolled back. Why is your work so vital to the community? And, in this kind of climate, why is it about?
Thank you for that question. I'm thinking so many things, and I'll try to be relatively quick. I think when I was listening to Ashley and what the question speaks to me, I was reminded of really the insidious nature of white supremacy, right? There is not only so much gaslighting and so many lies that we are told over and over and over to accept, right? That system of creating and perpetuating winners and losers and have nots, it also requires some of us, frankly, to buy into it and to perpetuate that same kind of thinking, right? And so we have to be clear about what we're up against. We have to be clear about not only the lies that we are being told, but we also have to be clear about where and what the truth is. And this current presidential administration is dangerous for a variety of reasons, but they are dangerous, I really think, primarily because they are continuing to and consistently lying directly to our faces about who we are and what we have experienced. And we have to stand up against that, and we have to fight back against those lies. That is incumbent upon all of us. And so when I think about why my work is important and why we bother, it's important, right? Because we're being lied to, and we have to bother because we have to. We don't have any other choice. In my work, I'm reminded daily of the fact that we are not even supposed to. Every day, I think about the fact that we are not supposed to be here. And I also am reminded that I simply cannot afford to be afraid. We have already experienced everything designed to kill us, to ensure our erasure. And so there's never going to be a time when I personally am going to be so afraid that I will not fight. have to sit with and confront the reality that the system, as Ashley mentioned, were never designed to benefit us, right? And so the work of fighting white supremacy, the work of fighting back against lies is now more crucial than ever. You know, as a child growing up in Portland, Oregon, okay, that's where I'm from. And so yes, there are Black folks in Portland. I always need to clarify that. My parents were both born there, and there's a really interesting history around the ways in which African American families came to in the Pacific Northwest. And there's also a very clear history of redlining and segregation, which is why I have two parents that have known each other since they were 7 years old, because they grew up as neighbors in the same redlined neighborhood in Portland, Oregon. And so we have to be clear about these systems that weren't designed to benefit, right? We have to be clear about the ways in which we continue to be impacted by those systems. And we have to be clear about the urgency of this moment. But growing up as a child in Portland, Oregon, I never imagined, right, that there would be a time where we would be so clearly confronted with the systems and the thinking that we thought, when we learned in school, that we had defeated, right, during the civil rights movement. But the reality is that folks are telling lies that come straight out of Birth of Nation at this time. And the people that are telling those lies and perpetuating that kind of thinking, they sit within the highest levels of power in the United States. That is a danger that we cannot afford to be complacent about. And so the work of organizing, the work of getting out into the streets or going to the city council or litigating in court, all of that has to happen. And we have to figure out ways in which we can plug in, because we simply cannot afford not to.
So, but as much as, you know, we can't afford not to, it also in this reality has become more costly. The people who speak truth to power, or the people who stand up, even your First Amendment, even my strict constitutionalists are supporting what doesn't seem to align when it comes to the First Amendment. So it is more costly these days. People are losing jobs, and we've seen on some issues people even leaving the country because they were speaking what they believe is truth to power. We want to get to Councilmember Joe Russo. You know, you are an attorney with an extensive litigation and trial background. But you serve on the city council, and I know for sure at times it can be a thankless job, because I know how many people call challenge this. And I say this, and I said this before, we only get the calls if something is wrong. So when you are doing things well, we don't know about it. We only get the calls when people have a billboard, neighborhood, and all the things in their district. Why serve in this capacity, and have you felt that you've been able to make a real impact, because you have 200 days left?
Well, look, I people don't believe this because I'm third generation elected official. I'm an accidental candidate, right? I thought this was going to skip a generation, and I was smart enough not to go into public service. But you know, my dad died unexpectedly, and the opportunity was there, and I really felt like the time was right. I was called to do the service, and candidly, I wanted to know at 40 years old, could I take this risk? Do it. Is this something I could live with? And sort of as you're reflecting, because like literally, this is like you see part of your professional death occurring to you. So I'm very much focused on what have you done, what have you learned. There are a few things. You know, I think a lot of times, particularly if you grew up where I did, like know that people who have less network, less agency, less time get less. But when you go to Hollywood, when you go to Dixon, which are the poorest parts of my district by a long shot, you see it up close. And so you know, Gina mentioned the person who's in mid-city with the billboard. If a car handle gets pulled on in Lakeview, or a car gets broken into Uptown, my phone is blowing up, my email is blowing up, but somebody's shot and killed in Hollywood, I may not hear of it. And that has made a profound impact upon me. And so I actually have Hollywood at noon. And again, you walk into other neighborhood associations, you know I'm walking in here, this housing issue is on the table. This bar may be an issue, this pothole or whatever. You know, I don't hear it from my poor neighborhoods. So what I have to do now is I bring DPW and sewage and water board to those meetings and say, hey, rather than me going back and trying to get an answer for you, let me bring them here to you so you can get your answers right now. And, you know, Gina, if you're like looking for sort of like the big picture things, I would say the two ones that are the most important to me from a legacy perspective are, number one, you know, we did not roll villages forward for 2 years or 2 cycles that we did. That saved taxpayers over $200 million. And I'm really proud about that because I know how hard. I know how hard and like, you know, again, in my richer communities, I get asked the question like, what is something you think we should know that we don't? Like that extra $20 is the difference between not keeping your lights on, not paying your grocery bill, not being able to go help somebody with their groceries. So that's extraordinarily important to keep the quality of life high without raising things unnecessarily. The second one is our friends at Sewage and Water Board. Those turbines are older than all of us in this room. Yeah. Yeah. And combined. And we are going to have a new substation this summer during hurricane season that is cleaner, more reliable, and new. And look, I'm not at the point where I try and compare myself to anybody else, but like this has been an issue for generations, right? We fixed it. And that's the combination of working with Senator Pluses to get money, with DA when he was on the council. And so if you can say here are 2 or 3 kind of grand slams that we hit during 7 or 8 years, I think that's about the best you can do and hopefully be responsive to people's.
The question is to you. Listen, so many questions around science lately, denying proven tested treatments. Just recently, our Health and Human Services Secretary had to admit that vaccines actually are an effective prevention measure because we got the babies dying of measles. And so finally we had to say something. In this reality, how do you remain focused on the data and doing the work of the medical community with all the challenges that you may be facing?
Ooh, yeah, need to pray for me. Because as we've talked about, not just in healthcare, but across genres, these people don't care about data. In the reality, it's about their personal and political preferences. And when you look at healthcare, up front and close, we are dealing with decisions of life and death every day. The decisions that they're making to gut the Health and Human Services Department, both at the federal level and state level, will have real consequences for each and every one. They are the people that make sure when we go out to eat at night, that those kitchens are clean and sanitized. They're the people that make sure that this school's kitchen is clean and sanitized. And when we walk outside, that the air we breathe is safe to breathe. He's getting rid of us. So who's going to protect us from those things we cannot see? That's the example that we're seeing with vaccinations. In theory, he can get out and say, oh, I don't believe in it. But then when you see people's real live children no longer breathing, you can't deny that. So for me, thinking about how that impacts us, not just at the hospital, but us as a people. We have seen when the power structure has determined that we are not worthy or deserving of the same care, the same treatments that data says will keep us alive and keep us healthy. We've seen that Tuskegee experiment and relax. That's where we're headed. That we're going to allow the political structure and policy to put us outside of what we know we deserve. So it is incumbent upon us to fight to make sure that the things that we deserve for our health we give. And it doesn't mean it happens in the 4 walls of a hospital. because I will tell you, as my dear sister here said, I'm at a point in life where, I'm just tired. The structures that we build called hospitals are built upon the backs of sick people. The data that keeps me open is based on how many of you are sick. A hospital is a business for sick people. So if you have somebody at the helm who's saying that we want you to be well, that's a threat to the system. Because well people don't get paid. The money follows the patient, Senator. And I say that because we work together a lot. Because we have a model that says we want to keep you well. We don't provide just sick care, but well care. But that means that I'm providing care out of my pocket. Nobody is funding well care. We have to self-fund it. We have to dream what the system should be to keep us well. Because this well care facility that's here when people have a disaster is where everybody's running. Most of y'all I didn't see till COVID hit. Let's be honest. Then COVID happened and the power structures said that we are going to prioritize care for people who don't look like us. We started looking for people who look like us. But we need to look for people who look like us all the time. While I enjoy that I am the only one who is leading a hospital as an African-American female in Louisiana, I should not be. We have extremely educated, powerful leaders in healthcare that look like mentors of mine that should be doing this work. We need to support them in doing this work in those industries because those are the people who understand that place matters for health. So where you came from today to drive here, whether you live in New Orleans East, Lakeview, the 7th Ward, Algiers, determines how long you're gonna live. Not how much money you have, how much beautiful clothes you have, purses and bags. It is the place where you live, the structures that are put in place, the policies around that clean air, access to fair housing, access to healthy foods. So the work that the people up here are doing is the most important thing for me in healthcare, in making sure that the places we live all have the same health opportunities.
Thank you, Dr.
That was beautifully put. And as we go to our next little part, I'm actually going to ask a question for each of the panelists to give a closing remark. So we're going to leave with some final thoughts from the panelists. But Dr. Davis set me up for this one for a question for Kashana Hill. And she talked about, where you live being a determinant of health. And so many people can't find quality places to live that they can afford. Issues like rising rents, gentrification, housing insecurity. I mean, what are the biggest challenges currently facing New Orleans in terms of really making the affordable housing happen for our residents? So many people feel pushed to the brink.
Well, and that's because they are, right? And so I really appreciate the setup around how where we live impacts our outcomes. And I know for folks, that have, maybe been to college or that have experienced, a certain level of privilege, that kind of thinking can be hard to accept, right? But the reality is that we are not exceptional enough on our own to sort of change, right, the parameters and the outcomes that on many levels are dictated by where we live. If we think about life expectancy, we already heard about the 25-year gap, right, in terms of life expectancy between Black folks and white folks in New Orleans. And I always think about that in terms of where the lowest life expectancy is in the city and where the highest life expectancy is. So in the Lakeview area, right, and I want to say here that Lakeview has, for all intents and purposes, 0 low-income voucher holder residents, right? So people who their incomes are low enough to qualify for housing choice vouchers, Section 8 vouchers, they have no access to it. Lakeview currently has the highest life expectancy, not only in New Orleans, but across the state of Louisiana. Lakeview is also a community that has the highest income level in New Orleans. And it's a community that was, instead of being redlined by the federal government, it was greenlined, right? Lots of federal investment went in, no Black folks were really able to get in. They were barred by restrictive covenants, things like that. And it is a community that experiences the highest outcomes, including longest life expectancy in New Orleans. Now, the lowest life expectancy belongs to a community that's just about 2 miles away, and that's the Tulane Graduate Neighborhood, zip code 70112, surrounding the Superdome, which is so interesting because that is such a symbol of wealth, right, in this city. But the folks who live in that neighborhood and that community experience a life expectancy that is 25 years shorter than the life expectancy of white folks living 2 miles away. That is not only not sustainable, but it is unconscionable and unacceptable. So we have to think about that and make decisions, right? And when I think about what is the biggest kind of challenge around affordable housing, a lot of us, and including folks who are in powerful positions, we have to change our thinking around who is a great life outcome. We have to be clear that everyone deserves to have good life outcomes. You don't have to have gone to college. You don't have to have, waited until you got married before you had children or whatever it is folks say, when they're talking about how people's personal responsibility comes into play. And so we have to be clear that people, by virtue of being here, by virtue of being human beings, deserve good life outcomes. And that starts with equitable access to housing opportunity, right? So we need to be clear that in our own spheres of influence, we are talking to our community members, we're talking to our neighbors. Are we sending emails saying we oppose the presence of affordable housing in our communities? Okay, we don't want to do that if we believe that everyone deserves access to good life outcomes. So we have to ensure that we are not perpetuating this thinking that says that certain people deserve certain things and that there should be haves and have-nots. We need to be clear about providing people what they need as being a way to a successful, thriving, inclusive city. We have to be honest about meeting people's needs and about clarifying that folks need to have access to housing opportunity. And so we have been, as community members, able to pull together and during the COVID pandemic, really demonstrate leadership and win policies that help to ensure equitable access to housing opportunity, like inclusionary zoning, which means that when developers get our dollars to build housing, right, they are required to have a certain number of for very low income residents. We need to get clear about the minimum wage across the state of Louisiana. What kind of outcomes are we expecting people to have when they're fighting for jobs that pay $7.25 an hour? And if they are working in the tourism or hospitality industry, if they are a server or a bartender, they can make as little as $2.13 an hour. We have to be clear about what that does in terms of a lack of access to opportunity. And so I think one of the biggest challenges is getting clear about where we are, and then also thinking about how we can engage with the system that is keeping so many people away from opportunity.
Being honest about where we are, definitely a takeaway. Sally, we want to talk about the education system in New Orleans. It's undergone significant changes, since Katrina, with the shift toward charter schools. There are ongoing debates about equity and access. From your perspective as a community organizer, what's the biggest challenge facing students, especially students from marginalized communities? What can we do to create a more just and effective education system?
I think that Lord have mercy. I think that what happened with our education was kind of a first test for what we're experiencing now. When our teachers got fired wholesale, what did we do about it? When we removed intergenerational professional folks from our neighborhoods, let them get expelled, let them take over our schools. Like, the way the kids have to travel to get to school, I'm asking mother of five, have to travel to get to school, the way that there's no, like, with 5 kids, all of our different days off, that's crazy. Like, there's so many things wrong with our schools. We have, as a person educated, as an educator, to see all of these Teach for America and City Year people, up in our classrooms and want to be friends with students instead of being their sisters. Like, it's so many things that are wrong with our schools. And what winds up happening at the base level, what Councilmember Jerusalem said about how the poor neighborhoods don't count, because we are taught we don't deserve. Yeah. We do not believe that we be heard, and that we don't even believe we should be heard sometimes. That is a symptom of the education system, the housing system, the health system, all of these. When you used to have neighborhood schools where we all knew each other, but now you have 400 kids from 32 different neighborhoods. What do you think is going to happen to the fabric of those communities and to the relationships between teachers and community that we used to have? The schools don't even have a relationship with the community that they're in. So there has to be something fundamentally changed about how we view and see one another, which is what Kashana said. We have to stop fighting each other. We have to stop thinking that some of us deserve less than others and treating each other in that way. We have to stop talking about our children when they love and gangsters. We have to stop when we see them in the street, not put our hands on them. We have to stop that so that they don't end up in the DA's office.
That's right.
So that they can be part of the pipeline to legislate for all of us, so that there can be more than 4 Black women in this country who are responsible for our health. Imagine our health outcomes if we had many doctors running hospitals. So we have to talk with ourselves, and that is part of our culture. And that's the role that we take on. We have to innovate inside of our culture to make us take care of each other again. And to see and believe that we are all worthy. And that is demonstrated in how we act, not in what we say. So I'm challenging each and every person in the room today, take account, take stock of how you treat the other people in your community. When you decide to stand up, when you decide to show up, they shouldn't be here. You can give these programs. All the questions, right? I'm sorry, I have to sit back. You can do that, we know. So I'm challenging us all to rid ourselves of some of those notions and look at where it's got. This is something.
Thank you.
Or determining what are the biggest crime challenges facing New Orleans, and talk about this in terms of young people. We've seen a lot of investment in the state in terms of youth corrections, if you will. But could we invest more in youth opportunity? I know that's not maybe not necessarily in your purview, but what trends are you seeing with young people like crime?
So, I just want to say how thoughtful Council Secretary has been in curating this discussion: housing, access to mental health, access to health. All of this is interconnected. All of this winds up in my lab and in Judge Pittman's lab when it's not with properly for a big poor housing project. Several years ago, those were taken down without any plan where these families. Okay. The Surgeon General said that one of the biggest indicators of violent crime, one of the things that prevented was grandmothers in inner cities and surrogate grandmothers. But when those big poor housing projects were taken down, families and communities were scattered. So we did not have that intergenerational check when a young person maybe wasn't at school or became truant or was doing something. And so everything is truly connected. But when you look at the trends, I would say trust. There's a lack of trust in the criminal legal system. For the decades of times when they just picked any Black man, they would get him and not committed crime, right? And so nothing is served, and because the person who committed harm is left in the community to commit further harm. And folks know it, right? So truancy is going to be a huge piece. A number of our young people fell through the cracks during the pandemic, and we don't know just how many fell through the cracks. We need to do an in-depth study about how many kids are back in actual physical seats now that we're back in this position. And we need to do an assessment about how far they may have fallen behind and not hold them accountable, not put everything on the teachers' plates because they can't take care of kids who are not in school. That's the city's job. And so looking at it from a global perspective, that trust piece is major, but having a civil rights division go back and correct the sins of the past is helping to rebuild trust, in fact, maybe build trust for the first time. Using technology, camera technology, social media technology. Michelle Woodfork is here with me today, our former police chief, who was the chief who brought crime down more than any other city in this country. And as soon as she was available, I wanted her on my team because if you want a strong team, you get the best folks and you put them in the court, right? And so she is helping us build more accurate cases that the community can believe in, because we have to put some people in jail because some people are hurting. But we got to make sure we're accurate, but we're getting the right ones. And we have to do what Desmond Tutu told us a long time ago. We can't just, there comes a time we can't just keep pulling people out of the river. That's traditional work. Sometimes we have to go upstream and figure out why they're falling in. And so our No Doubts program uses data to inform why there are certain crime trends in certain neighborhoods. And we pull in the city council, we pull in nonprofits, pull in faith-based leaders, so that we can fix what's broken before it winds up being in court cases.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney Williams. Councilmember Jeruso, you talked about it earlier in terms of like sewage and water board and drainage, but I'm just going to ask you about general quality of life issues in New Orleans in your time as council. Is there a thing that you can point to the most that has really affected or changed the quality of life for the better for your constituents?
I'd like to thank other panelists for ceding their time to me now. That's a hard one. What I would say honestly to that is I don't know if there's one single thing, but I think it's really working with Jason and again having worked with people on this panel about how do we use the budget to affect outcomes. And Jason and Royce have heard me say this a whole lot. I think too many people in our society get dug into war positions. Jason just mentioned everybody should be in jail or nobody should be in jail. You know, you don't go to your doctor and they don't say that you eat your fruit or your vegetables. They say that you eat your fruit and your vegetables. And so I think really when we start looking about what we've done, we've invested in the DA's office. We've given Jason, I think, almost all the money that you've asked for. But we've also invested in programs like No Does. We've invested in OPSP. We've invested in North. We've invested in programs on the front end, and I would argue that part of the reason that you've seen a decline in crime is not only because of the actions like Chief Woodfork and DA Williams, but it's because we've also started to see the front end investment that's so important. We talk all the time too about locking people up, but Sean, you mentioned this too. Like I will always argue blight reduction is a public safety, public health strategy, right? I mean, you can literally look at a map and circle blight, guess what's right next to it? Violence. Exactly right. Knock down the blight, guess what happens? Crime goes down. Communities get stood up. So I think really the answer in my mind is I always want to be evaluated on how we use the money that we have to make things better. Now, I'll be the first to say that not everything in the city is the way that people want it to be. But I think we can definitely report to outcomes on light, on crime reduction, on healthier people, on mental health, on all of these programs. Let me just also, like, as we're coming full circle on this and tying everything together, federal government's covering all of these programs, right? Federal government also cut not only programs for community development block grant, for health services, they're also cutting infrastructure. So you may have just seen in the paper the other day, FEMA's not getting $700 million for building resilient infrastructure in communities. Now, in Luce Parish, that means they can't harden their grid. In Orleans, it means you were supposed to get money to raise your house so water wouldn't come in there, and that money isn't. So I think it's going to be, as we talk about like our responsibility and our duty, so to be vigilant, part of it is also how the city stands into that gap and stands together, shoulder to shoulder, to make sure those programs are.
Thank you, Councilman. Dr. Davis. Because this is all interconnected, you heard Councilmember Caruso talk about it. The Department of Health and Human Services carried out mass layoffs, slashing 10,000 full-time jobs from federal agencies. Locally, there have been directives about silencing vaccination efforts and cuts at the state health department. How are these cuts impacting the work that you do? And what steps is the hospital taking to address these issues?
The cuts, as we stated, across the board are a threat to the hospital specifically, but to the services that we provide to the community. New Orleans East Hospital is a public-private partnership. Majority of our funding came from HUD. So as HUD is being gutted, right, in the same way that HUD provides fair housing support to individuals, it provides support as a hospital program to build hospitals in communities with us. So we don't know how that may impact us there. With HHS, we serve over 55% of our population is receiving Medicaid or Medicare. Our current leader at the federal level is projecting to cut those services by 10%. We are an extremely poor state that already is struggling to meet our due diligence and responsibility with respect to Medicaid. So that means a lot of people that I serve won't have services, right? They won't be able to have the coverage and access with respect to those services. And those are things that not just I'm facing, but all of our hospital systems, right? So where it may be tens of millions of dollars for me, when we think about some of our larger systems, hundreds of millions of dollars. So we're going to be faced with whether we actually close buildings, right? We lay off, which gets back to the underpinning of your question, how this all ties together. All of these cuts really will get at whether or not we have the economic stability to be able to have the opportunity for health, education, housing for all the people that we care. And we will have to collectively think about how we redesign these systems because we all know and have very vivid examples that even before this crazy government that we're in now, whereas the federal government is not going to save, but should be in partnership with us as we're redesigning and demanding what we deserve. And we've heard that across many of our panelists that we forget, sometimes don't even know what we do deserve. So we've got to get very clear about the fact that we not only deserve fair housing and fair access to the social justice system that treats us fairly and equality in healthcare and education. We deserve all of it, not either or, but the and. And it takes all of us getting a little bit uncomfortable about who comes and lives next door, a little bit uncomfortable about who comes to the school that my child goes to, a little bit uncomfortable about who receives the health care, the same care that I get, right? That it is not elitist. I don't deserve better than them, but we all deserve that same opportunity. That rising tide floats all boats, and we've got to get real.
Absolutely. Senator Duplessis. Thank you, Dr. Davis. Senator Duplessis, you talked about insurance being an issue that's going to impact all of us. The session starts Monday, Wednesday, 14th. Okay, legislative session. Describe for us the atmosphere, if you will, for the legislative session, and what can we do to support any type of legislative initiative that you are putting forth?
Thank you. Well, I would just encourage the women of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated to continue doing what you've been doing. You all show up so strong. Y'all, I mean, not just every legislative session, you all are there, so well represented. But even going back to the work you all began years ago around the census and understanding the importance of getting our people engaged, getting our people to complete the census, because we knew that was going to tie directly into what? Redistricting, right? Which we knew was going to tie directly into what? A federal lawsuit, which we knew was going to tie directly into what? A case before the United States Supreme Court. I'm saying all that to say it's so vital that we understand and not lose sight of the fact that representation matters. You see, there are a lot of people that want to move beyond this race conversation. I'm not one of those people, and I want to be clear about that. And it's not an emotional argument I'm making. I'm gonna end how I started, talking about my grandmother. I talked about similar systems and how things are similar, and but a lot of it was different then, right? There wasn't a Voting Rights Act, there wasn't a Civil Rights Act, there were a lot of things that had not taken place. But literally, right now, before the U.S. Supreme Court, is the case around the second Black congressional district. So yeah, we have it right now, but it doesn't mean that we're going to keep it. And there are still forces out there fighting to say that there is no need for a second Black congressional district. Understand the climate is what I'm saying. So let's not get comfortable. That's my message, to not get comfortable, because those forces are still in place. And until we can make a data argument to say that no, there's no need for a second Black congressional district, or there's no need for diversity, equity, and inclusion because the data backs it up, then maybe we can have that conversation. But there is no data to suggest that there's no need for diversity, equity, and inclusion. There is no data to suggest that the third of the state is represented without a second Black congressional district. And the same thing applies to state elections. The same thing applies to municipal elections, in my opinion. So let's not lose sight of it, and let's not get comfortable, because they want us to be comfortable.
Right. Picking up this discussion, rapid fire, 30 seconds or less. We're just going to go down the line. I got your audience questions, but I believe this one kind of encapsulates everything. As we dream of a better New Orleans, how do we define what good looks like? We'll start with the DA. We're going to go down the line. This is going to be our final thought. How do we define what good looks like? 30 seconds.
I believe that the city of New Orleans can have safe streets and fair courts. Those two things are not antithetical. They're two sides of one coin. And I believe that we're delivering on that. And I believe if we can stay focused on that, we can get back to what we need.
I would say when I go to neighborhood meetings, like 85% of the issues are all the same. I hear about light, I hear about streets, I hear about infrastructure, about huge water board bills. And I think too many times we get into a tendency to be like, well, this is a Gentilly issue, this is a Central City issue, this is a New Orleans East issue, this is a Lakeview issue. It's all our issue. You want to have a better New Orleans? Let's start putting everybody together and say, these are the things that we want. These are the things we all deserve. And these are the way we're all going to work together so we lift everybody up like the rising tide that Dr. Davis mentioned.
To me, good looks like radically just systems that are not rooted in fear nor division, but instead are rooted in acceptance and love. For me, good looks like when I get up in the morning in Algiers, drive to my mom's and drop my son off at school in Gentilly. One in Lakeview, soon to be in Baton Rouge, something in Baton Rouge, thank God. Go to church on First and Bryant, that the people who live in each of those neighborhoods has the same life expectancy. Same life expectancy, no different than where you converse or live every day. And so I think the way that we get there is two things. One, we have to work to solve problems for the most impacted people. We have to do that collaboratively. We have to come together as a city, as a people, and design solutions for the people who have it first among us. That's number one. And number two, we have to acknowledge that most of the laws that govern us were created And most of the laws that continue to govern us to this very day were made, we were considered chattel and property. We have to revisit all of our at a city level, at a state level, and remake them. Any law that hurts a black person, take it off. Period.
I think for me, you can pick any day of the week and walk in a classroom, whether it's at McDonald 35, whether it's at L.E. Landry, whether it's at St. Mary's, Sarah T. Reed, you pick a school, you can walk into a classroom, talk to these young people, and know that these young people know that they are cared about. And that they see their own hope and their own value and know that they are loved. To me, that's a benefit.
So you wrap it up? And to your platform, please.
We want to just thank the panel. Thank you, Gina Swanson, who did a phenomenal job. I would also like to acknowledge any elected officials who are here, which is stand and wave your hand so that you can be acknowledged. Representative Jacob Hughes. Judge Clint Smith, thank you so much. At this time, we'll ask our president of New Orleans and Long Beach chapter. Once again.